Turn to Genesis chapter 1. I know we've been in Genesis chapter 1 for a little bit. We've been setting the stage for understanding the backdrop for creation, just how critical it is in our belief system. And to understand that the book of Genesis lays the foundation for a whole lot of biblical teachings and themes that are even critical for the Christian faith. And think of the difference it makes if you believe that God created the heavens and the earth or not. It's interesting. This is a statement of fact. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Well, if you don't believe that, what are your options? See, what are your options? Well, some ancient cultures came up with their mythologies of beginning stories, you might say. But in every culture that's tried to figure out what the beginning of the earth was like, there's always been the realization that without God being the source of the beginning, you have no foundation for morals or purpose or even a future. And that's why the belief that God is the creator of heaven and earth is such an important one. Now, let's take one further step on this, because this ties directly to what we're doing right now on the days of creation. Probably within the last 100 years, it's been kind of popular to take the view that the days were not literal in Genesis 1, that they're just a long period of time. Now, some of the motivation to say that is because people try to support a perspective that's called theistic evolution, which I don't buy that. A lot of people do. But here's my take on this. If God can create heaven and earth, and I believe that, is it a stretch of imagination to say that in 7 days he can do something? Or 6 and rest on the 7th? I mean, I don't understand why it seems so impossible for people to believe that the God that created the heaven and earth could do something within 24 hours that we're going to walk through this. People are trying to force in their understanding a scientific view that they think explains the beginnings with how Genesis portrays it. Let's think about this. The Bible and the book of Genesis is a statement of faith in that it provides the foundation for the beginning of salvation history. The Bible's not interested just in history. It's not just a history book. It has a lot of history in it. The Bible, neither is it a scientific handbook. Now, there are some scientific facts in it, but that's not what the Bible's about. Now, for both history and science, because the Bible is God's truth, think of it this way. The truth of the Bible will never be contradictory with true science and true history. What people don't want to admit is that sometimes the connection that we wish we could see between the two is just not there, and it's a mystery. Well, what's funny is, you know this, sometimes the human mind hates a mystery and a vacuum of knowledge. So guess what happens? People will supply what they want. Well, in the book of Genesis, especially the creation, there's a lot of things that aren't mentioned specifically. We don't know. And what it does, it forces you with your belief system to say, it's okay to believe that God created the world, and it's okay to not to know every single thing about that process. He didn't tell us, so we don't know. Now, if you have a theory about certain things, that's okay, but you just tell me it's a theory. Don't you tell me I have to believe that. It's a theory. One of the things that's difficult for people If I say this, you'll know this for a fact. The more that people think they know, it's harder for them to embrace humility. But think about this too. This is so critical. I remember one time saying this to a person. Questions are good. I believe that questions can be the soil in which the seed of faith is planted and it can grow. Questions are good. Did I tell you once what I was a teenager, and I wish to this day I could remember what the discussion was. But my mother looked at me. She said, "You know what your problem is?" I'm like, "What's my problem, Mom?" "You ask too many questions."
She didn't know that.
Yeah, you ask too many questions. Well, the way I look at it, questions are great if, now here's a big if, you don't use them to drive a wedge between you and God. People too often, and I've seen this, they will allow their questions to be an excuse for no Christian commitment. I hate to see that, but it's in a lot of people. Well, if I don't get my questions answered, I'm not going to follow God. Well, if that's your viewpoint, well, then you don't really have a place in your spiritual journey to embrace the mystery and the unknown, because there's going to be a whole lot of unanswered questions, and you just have to accept that. I saw yesterday where, are all of you familiar with Charlie Kirk being shot this week? Well, I have a place in my sermon I'll talk about a little bit. They showed a clip on him that was interesting yesterday, because he's used to going into college campuses where young people don't know God. And one person asked him, "So are you a Christian?" He said, "Sure." And he said, "I have hope. I'm looking toward heaven." He said, "I'm glad that this isn't all that there is." And the other guy stood up, he goes, "Well, I'm an atheist and this is all that there is. And I'm just trying to live life and make it better for others." So when he finished, Charles Kirk goes, "Well, have you ever hoped there was more?" And the young man wasn't prepared for that question. Have you ever hoped that there was more? If you're telling me there's not, have you ever hoped? And I don't guess anybody had ever asked him that question before. So, but the whole issue of beginnings is crucial. This is the foundation of it all. Okay. Now we've looked already at through day 3, and let's look at day 4. And I was thinking about this this week. These categories of description of the creation are general in nature. Can you imagine how long Genesis chapter 1 would be if if God had decided, I'm going to make a list here of every single thing on the earth that was ever created? Well, just the whole section on insects would be endless. So I'm fascinated by the fact that you've got just your general category for you to think about. Okay. So verse 14, and God said, "Let there be lights in the expanse of the sky to separate the day from night, let them serve as signs to mark seasons and days and years." So you've got lights in the sky. I have a question. Why talk about lights in the sky in day 4 when up on day 1, let there be light and there was light? How can you have light without lights in the sky? It is fascinating that it starts off with God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And it's such a beautiful statement of God's presence in the midst of darkness. And you're going to see all through the Bible that the imagery of light versus darkness is like good versus evil. Here's the thing that's fascinating too, though. On the third day, you've got land and earth, and in that, the vegetation. Remember, it talks about all the vegetation with trees bearing fruit with seed in it according to their kind. God saw that it was good. Oh, I know what we're going to talk about. Yeah, remember last week? Let's talk a moment about this concept. This is so important. It starts having a comment after, let's see, look in verse 2. Verse 2 says, and it was so. But then after the comment, and it was so, you've got, and it was so. Let's talk about, it's like an assessment or a fact. It's a fact. Here, it's an assessment. It was good. Now let's talk about the good for a moment. Nancy's not here. She was going to talk about the good from an artist perspective. What is it? Why is this important in the story of creation? The observation that God saw that it was good. So tell me about that. What are the different, think of it this way, what are the different dimensions of good? There's something about the aesthetics of something being good, that it looks good. What's interesting in the whole field of philosophy, this area of aesthetics goes all the way back to Aristotle trying to figure out what makes something beautiful and good. Philosophers have tried to, delineate that through the centuries. But yeah, you start off with, okay, think about the beauty.
There was color in it.
The beauty of what was good. I mean,
Well, to me, everything would not look so good if everything gray.
so you've got
you've got green grass.
you've got diversity of color. Think about design. See, this is why if Nancy were here, she'd talk to you all about this. From an artist's perspective, diversity of color, design, composition. An artist will talk about composition. So all different dimensions that an artist, and Nancy, she said this a lot. When she starts a painting, she has this feeling, well, it's not quite what it needs to be. And then it's finally where she'll step back, she goes, yeah, that's good. So she has that sense that it's let's put the other word up here, completed. When something's good, it's completed because it is finished. A few times, and sometimes artists are guilty of this, and she'll tell you in a heartbeat that if artists aren't careful, they're always so dissatisfied with the final product. They want to keep adding and keep adding. And there are a couple times say, no, don't touch it. It looked good. Don't touch it. So it's complete. If it's good, it's completed. Okay. What else can the word good mean? See, it's a fascinating thing to think about because too often I think when we read through Genesis chapter 1 and the creation chapter, we just kind of pass over the comment, God saw that it was good. And then we just kind of move on. Well, notice the idea of completed. It's completed, but let's be even more specific in that its completion is fulfilling the original purpose. Oh, so here's a cool question. You ready for this one? What was God's purpose in making creation?
He knew that he was going to make humans.
Yeah.
Okay, so with human beings being the pinnacle of creation. Oh, okay. So
We,
maybe this is a neat idea, Larry. Thanks for bringing it up. Maybe the idea of good is also including the fact that the setting of the world in which God is creating all this is going to make it a perfect setting for human beings to be created and to live in that setting. What was it that after God got through and rested on the seventh day, what's the comment that it was not good? What is the one thing that specifically said a little bit later that it's not good? Adam was alone. It is not good. Okay? Now, isn't that interesting? From I would say from a God perspective, why was it not good that Adam was alone? God and Christ and the Holy Spirit are not alone. It's divine relationship. Now, there's an old Latin word No. It's a Greek word that was used by the early church fathers and through the medieval ages to talk about this relationship. Okay. And it's the word perichoresis. Now, you don't have to write that down. I'm not going to give you a pop quiz on it. But it's the idea of three people dancing around in a relationship that the father, son, there's a logo. What does it look like? There's a logo that people use for what we call the Godhead. There's a sign. I'll have to look it up. But it's supposed to give you the idea that you don't know where to start, because wherever you start, the design is the same all the way around. So you've got Father, Son, and Holy Spirit in eternal relationship. Okay? So it was not good that Adam was alone, because guess what? The Godhead's not alone. A few years ago, and I wish I could remember the author's name in the book. He did some research on human relationships in our culture, and he came down to an interesting conclusion after his research. And I thought, hey, Christians already knew that. His conclusion was, human beings. Here's what he basically said: human beings are hardwired for relationships. I went, well, duh, Christians already knew that, God, Christ, and the Spirit. Holy relationship. Some people use the word Trinity, the Godhead. So we're not surprised that after Adam is created, God looks at Adam being alone. There's no other human being. It's not good that he's alone. Okay? And think about how there's another reason it's not good. It's because of the nature of covenant relationship. You can't have a covenant if you're alone. Now, some people say, well, you can make a promise to yourself, but it's not like a real covenant between people. Okay. So this whole idea of that it was good, this is a pretty powerful statement of God's purposes each day, slowly unfolding to the ultimate pinnacle of creation, which is Adam and Eve. Now look what else is in the fourth day. Notice that these lights, and he said he made two lights. The greater light to govern the day and the lesser light to govern the night. And he also made the stars. The scientific world sending, and we've got telescopes and satellites that are bringing back images of our universe further out than we ever dreamed that we could have pictures. But I don't know if you've been watching either on the internet or TV every now and then. The pictures that are coming back are just amazing to me. And the expanse of the universe. It's kind of funny that scientists are trying as hard as they can to see if there's life elsewhere in the universe. Now, I have two responses to that. You might have a response. My response is, well, if there's life elsewhere, that's God's business. He can do whatever he wants. The other thing is, personally, I wouldn't be surprised if human beings on earth is the only life in the universe. That God made the world and he made us unique to the universe. That wouldn't surprise me either. Okay? So it is interesting that God made the stars, and some of the stars, as we are aware of, make up galaxies. And boy, it's just incredible. I saw the other day where they have pictures back from Pluto, and it is not at all what they thought. And apparently, based on some of the instruments they've got, the temperature on Pluto gets down to like 300 something minus zero. Well, like 300, what was it? 343 degrees minus zero. Well, that's lower than our Earth absolute zero, isn't it? So it's intriguing to me that minds want to know. And so you're inquiring about all that. But to me, the more and more that scientists discover what's out there, the more and more you have to embrace mystery. Because the more you find out you don't know. Boy, you talk about a humble thing, and we just have to realize that the God who made the universe is a God of mystery. And he has used, think about this, God has used the avenue of language, and we're looking at its written language in the Bible, to reveal some of himself, a little teeny piece of himself that our feeble human brains can get around. And so that's what we're looking at here in Genesis chapter 1. Now, notice that these signs, these two lights, one's the greater light and the lesser light, and the stars, notice they're to mark the seasons and the days and the years. And that's what happens, isn't it? Guess what next Sunday is? Next Sunday and Monday, kind of depending on how you look at it. It's the equinox. Fall starts. Really? We mark it by the seasons. We're aware of the seasons. We look at the days. We look at the years. We mark those. And let them be lights in the expanse of the sky to give light on the earth. Well, the sun and the moon gives light on the earth. So God set them in the expanse of the sky to give light on the earth, to govern the day and the night, to separate light from darkness. And God saw that it was good, and there was evening and there was morning the fourth day. There has been throughout Christian history the practice of looking at nighttime as death, and that in the morning when the sun comes up, it's a new resurrection day. And the realization that darkness is dispelled by the light, and the sun portrays the creative power of God to separate light from darkness. And sometimes if we're not careful, we just think of, well, sun's come up, time for me to get up. And Chris, we're all guilty of this. If we're not careful, we just live life on a mundane level, and we don't stop and think the powerful symbolism of things and how throughout history Christians have thought about some of these things, so that nighttime is what they call the little death, and morning with the sun is the little resurrection. And so when you wake up in the morning, you thank God that, in fact, there's a verse in the Psalms, I ran across it the other night, where David is thankful that God made his eyes open in the morning. And I thought, it might be helpful if we gain that attitude. I didn't wake up just because I had a good enough night's sleep. God opened my eyes. Otherwise, I wouldn't have made it this morning. I remember growing up, here's what my grandmother would say. And when we would visit her, she made sure that we were in by dark. She'd say, nothing good happens after dark. And so in our minds, sometimes we associate, darkness with something being sinister. We have to watch out because, it's dark. But the way God has created this, and think about this. Some people say that one of the strongest arguments for the existence of God is the design and the interwoven purposes and connections of his creation. It's kind of like, what was the famous philosopher who put together an argument that's called the watchmaker as an argument for God. For example, if I pull off my watch and I look at my watch, I look at it and my mind says, okay, that just didn't create itself. There had to be somebody that knew enough about making a watch to put all the pieces together so I can end up with a watch. So there's got to be a watchmaker. And the argument has been through the centuries that you look at the world, there's so much order and interconnected design, you can't say it just kind of happened by accident. There had to be an earth maker. And to me, that's a pretty strong argument. Yeah, it just didn't happen by accident. There had to be an earth maker. So, and I think that guy was really onto something. So we got at the end of the fourth day where God puts up the lights in the sky. And let's say this because this is important. with the lights in the sky. They have a purpose with seasons and time, and also in ancient travel, before their GPS, people would use the stars at night to navigate. Yeah, people that, ships and that sort of thing. And even using the sun to chart, make maps, and tell time during the day. Day number 5 starts on verse 20. God said, "Let the water teem with living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the expanse of the sky." So you've got the water teeming with living creatures. So let's put up here, living creatures. I'm always amazed when I watch, sometimes on the History Channel or the Discovery Channel, they keep finding living creatures deep in the ocean they didn't know existed. You would think with all the scientific equipment that we've got, we would have discovered everything. Ooh, there's still new species they're discovering. And like, wow. Well, living things on Earth, the vegetation, everything. I read recently, this kind of blew my mind. Just in the Smoky Mountain National Park, there's been a number of new plants and new insects have been discovered so that they categorize. It's hard for us to say that we know everything about everything. We don't. And what you're going to find here is this broad expression in the waters. Guess what? God created these living creatures. That's a real broad term. Let the birds fly across the expanse of the sky. So God created the great creatures of the sea and every living and moving thing with which the water teems, according to their kinds, and every winged bird according to its kind. Now, some people feel that this language in and of itself cancels out any kind of perspective that you can claim on evolution. Because what does he say? It's everything after its own kind or species. You don't have anything crossing over and creating a new species. This is real specific language. Everything according to its kind. You don't have monkeys becoming people later on. You don't have birds becoming frogs. You don't have, there's this is such a critical statement. We think about it for a moment. God's design, that goes back again to God's design. God's design is that every living and moving thing with which the water teems according to their kinds, and every winged bird according to its kind. So you don't have crows and cardinals mixing up. You don't have hummingbirds and robins mixing up. No, every species according to its kind. That's a neat comment. And of course, you think, wow, I wish we had more here. But again, it's just a restatement, but it's a foundational statement. And every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. Now, this may be the first, let me think before I say this. I'm looking. See, look at what he's going to say. He blessed them and said, see, this is the first time that God has offered a blessing. Genesis, because remember I talked about how that implicit within the whole book of Genesis is the covenant call of God. And when you talk about covenants, there's blessings or curses all the time. And it looks like because God uses, or he says here, that he's going to bless his creation. In a moment, he's going to say what? Be fruitful and multiply. Well, those are blessings that he's pronouncing on his creation. That sounds like covenant language. So that, think about this. God's an eternal covenant. We just mentioned a while ago, God, Christ, and the Holy Spirit. God's going to be in covenant with Adam and Eve. God's also in covenant with the world he created. There's something about that, and God blesses it. Now, when Adam and Eve sin and they're expelled from the garden, something happens with that covenant relationship that God has with the earth. Now, much time have I got? I can relate. We typically think that when Adam and Eve were expelled from the garden, and Paul will argue this, that through one man, what is this, Romans 6, through one man, Adam, sin entered into the world. But also something else happened. And there's not as much made of it in the Bible, but it certainly is there because of this beginning to look at it. Something else happened to the earth. We get a hint of that when God comes to Adam and he says, okay, you sinned. Now, as part of the consequence, guess what? You're going to have to work by the sweat of your brow, and the ground's going to be cursed with thorns. See, something happened to the earth. That's why in Romans 8, guess what Paul says? The whole creation is groaning and waiting for its redemption. Not just human beings, but redemption also includes the whole earth. And that's probably a reference to the new heavens and new earth. Or as Paul would say in 1 Corinthians 15, he doesn't go into detail, but some kind of glorified existence where we have a new glorified body and we're going to be in a glorified existence, new heavens, new earth. But that is God's creation waiting and groaning for its redemption. Why? Because sin not only affected human beings, it affected the earth. Isn't that amazing? It was years before I even thought about that. But that's part of the big picture. And I think that's why you have the expression new heaven and new earth. It's not enough to say that God created this world. That's a starting point, but it's not enough. Just with this dynamic going on, we also need to reflect on what are the purposes for which God created the world. Does God want his purposes to continue to be fulfilled in the world in which he created? So these are the kind of questions that it forces us to ask, all because we're not just interested in the fact that it was just created by God. We have to take the next step of faith and ask the purpose questions related to it. Oh, okay. Well, thank you for your attention this morning. And hopefully this has been interesting as we go through Genesis chapter 1.